Imagine you are a pilot, but you aren't just flying some standard route on a sunny afternoon. You are flying a heavily damaged passenger plane right through the chaotic center of a severe storm.
Oh man, yeah. That sounds terrifying.
Right, and every single time you touch the controls, there is a cascading consequence. Like you pull a lever to fix your altitude right now, but that same lever might, I don't know, completely stall the engine 3 hours later.
Right, because you are constantly making these massive trade-offs between immediate survival and long-term disaster.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate balancing act. There's no single correct move in a vacuum. There's only this really complex sequence of calculated risks where the ground is just always shifting beneath you.
Well, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are taking you into a scenario that is just as high stakes as that storm, but it happens every single day in the intensive care unit.
Yeah, it really does.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to explore an incredible, just tectonic shift in artificial intelligence. We are unpacking how researchers are teaching AI to not just read medical textbooks and, spit out definitions, but to actually practice medicine in a virtual sandbox.
Which is huge.
It is. And the goal here is to build an AI that can save lives without ever making a rookie mistake on a real patient.
To do that, we are grounding our discussion today in a fascinating new preprint research paper. It's from researchers at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Beijing Hospital.
Right.
And the overarching theme of their work is creating this thing called a clinical world model.
A clinical world model.
Yeah, which is basically a simulated environment where an AI can interact with patient dynamics before making a real-world decision.
And the condition they chose to focus on is sepsis, which I think perfectly mirrors that damaged airplane analogy we just talked about.
Look, it's a perfect fit.
For anyone who hasn't encountered it, sepsis is a leading cause of ICU mortality. It happens when an infection triggers this crazy chain reaction throughout the patient's body.
Right. It essentially leads to systemic organ failure.
Yeah. And to keep that patient alive, doctors have to constantly titrate, meaning they have to carefully measure and adjust two main things over a period of days: intravenous fluids and vasopressors.
And this is an incredibly intense, high cognitive load challenge for human clinicians. Like, you give a patient aggressive IV fluids, and you might successfully raise their blood pressure.
So you fixed their altitude for the moment, right?
Exactly. But a few hours later, that massive influx of fluid could seep into their lungs, causing pulmonary edema or, severely damage their kidneys.
Wow.
And on the flip side, if you lean too heavily on vasopressors, which constrict the blood vessels to raise pressure, you risk cutting off blood flow to the extremities entirely.
Which brings us to the core tension of this research. Okay, let's unpack this. I think a lot of people listening might be wondering, wait, if we have these super smart, large language models that can pass the medical licensing board exams in the 90th percentile.
Right. They're incredibly smart on paper.
Yeah, and they have essentially memorized every medical guideline ever published. So why can't they just look at a patient's chart and calculate the perfect fluid dosage? I mean, they literally know the rules of medicine.
Well, knowing the rules of medicine is fundamentally different from predicting the future.
Okay, fair.
This is the blind spot that AI has historically faced in the ICU. It really comes down to the difference between the semantic layer and the dynamics layer.
The semantic layer versus the dynamics layer.
Right. So the semantic layer means the AI knows the textbook definition of a drug. It can summarize the official guidelines for treating sepsis flawlessly.
But the dynamics layer is the messy reality.
Exactly. It's the ability to predict how this specific, unique patient with their specific age, weight, and, current organ function will react to a specific dosage over the next 4, 8, or 12 hours.
Right, because treating a disease like sepsis is not just a single multiple choice question.
No, not at all. In computer science terms, it is a discrete Markov decision process.
Okay, wait. Let's unpack the mechanics of that, because Markov decision process sounds super intimidating.
It does, but the concept is actually highly intuitive. A Markov decision process simply describes a scenario where every single action you take fundamentally alters the board state.
Like chess.
Sort of, yeah. Like if a doctor administers fluids at hour 1, the patient they were treating at hour 2 is biologically different than they were an hour ago.
Oh, I see. Their heart rate is different. Their blood volume is different.
Right. Their cellular chemistry has shifted. The AI has to understand time, state transitions, and consequence. And generic language models, by their very design as next word predictors, they've been completely blind to that physical reality.
Because an LLM doesn't have a built-in mental model of physics or biology. It just, knows which words usually follow other words.
Precisely.
So the researchers realized they couldn't just drop an LLM into an ICU and ask for treatment plans. They had to build the AI a specialized sandbox to play in first.
Yes.
And they call it the clinical world model.
Right. And a world model is essentially an engine that simulates reality. The researchers constructed this specific clinical world model using a massive, highly respected medical database called MIMEC.
MIME, yeah.
Yeah, they extracted the records of over 20,000 real-world ICU stays, and they were looking exclusively at patients who were treated for sepsis.
And what's fascinating is how they structured that data. They didn't just, dump 20,000 medical charts onto a hard drive.
No, that wouldn't work.
They broke every single patient's stay down into precise 4-hour intervals. For every 4-hour window, they tracked 42 different clinical variables.
Yeah, it's incredibly detailed.
We are talking about heart rate, arterial pressure, lactate levels, oxygen saturation, and detailed lab results.
And to process that staggering amount of temporal data, they used an architecture with an internal memory mechanism.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, this allows the model to look at a patient's current state while also remembering the sequence of events that happened over the previous days.
So it actually has a sense of history.
Exactly. Then they gave the AI an action space to navigate. Picture a 5x5 grid.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
On the x-axis, you have 5 different dosage percentiles for IV fluids, ranging from 0 to maximum. On the y-axis, you have 5 dosage percentiles for vasopressors.
Okay, so that means the AI has 25 possible treatment combinations it can choose for any given 4-hour window.
You got it. And here's where the simulator does its job. The AI can pick a coordinate on that grid, say moderate fluids and high vasopressors. Then the clinical world model calculates the physical consequences. It tells the AI, if you execute this treatment, here's what this specific patient's blood pressure and lactate levels will look like in 4 hours.
Oh.
It tells them, here is whether their lungs will fail and they'll need a ventilator, and ultimately, here is how this decision impacts their overall probability of surviving the hospital stay.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but for life or death.
That's a great way to put it. It acts as an action-conditioned approximation of the patient's biological evolution. It gives the AI the ability to safely explore counterfactuals. It can ask what-if questions without ever risking a real life.
It is essentially a high-fidelity flight simulator for medicine. Before the AI commits to a treatment plan and writes an actual prescription, it can run a simulation to see if the patient's biology crashes.
Exactly.
It can say, if I push maximum fluids right now, does the patient stabilize? And the simulator can reply, no, reverse course. That action just triggered acute kidney injury.
Which is just an incredible capability.
Yeah.
So at this point in the research, you might think the problem is solved. You build the simulator, you plug a state-of-the-art AI into it, and suddenly you have a master physician.
Right. Problem solved. We can all go home.
But this is where the research takes a sharp, completely counterintuitive turn.
Oh, yeah. This was easily the most surprising part of the source material for me, because you would naturally assume that giving a hyper-intelligent AI a crystal ball would instantly make it a better doctor.
You would think so.
But the researchers actually put this to the test. They took several of the most advanced generic models available today. We're talking models like GPT 4.1 Mini, Gemini 3 Flash, and OpenAI's reasoning model, O3.
Heavy hitters.
Yeah. And they handed these models the Clinical World Model Simulator, and they gave them the official medical guidelines for sepsis just to ensure they had every possible advantage.
Right. And the results were genuinely shocking. The performance was highly inconsistent across the board. In some cases, it was actively detrimental.
Wait, detrimental?
Yeah. For example, Gemini 3 Flash actually performed worse on the off-policy evaluation metrics when it was given access to the world model and the clinical guidelines compared to its standard unaugmented version.
I have to pause there. How could giving a smart AI more tools, more data, and a literal crystal ball make its medical decisions objectively worse? That feels like a paradox.
What's fascinating here is that it reveals a profound flaw in how generic AI models process feedback. The researchers discovered that these models fall into the trap of short-term optimization.
Oh.
They essentially act like greedy algorithms. When you give a generic AI a simulator, it overtrusts the immediate short-term improvements.
When you say greedy algorithm, you mean it's just grabbing the shiny reward that's right in front of its face, completely ignoring the cliff it's about to walk off.
Precisely. The AI would query the simulator, Find an action that instantly stabilizes the patient's blood pressure for the next 4 hours and immediately lock in that decision. But it misinterpreted noisy short-term feedback. By focusing entirely on making the numbers look good in the immediate time step, it chose aggressive treatments that ultimately hurt the long-term survival outcome of the patient.
Oh, I see. It's the pilot pulling the damaged plane straight up to avoid a single cloud, only to stall the engine and drop out of the sky an hour later.
Exactly. The generic AI doesn't know how to weigh a short-term victory against a long-term catastrophic loss.
Which leads to the core realization of this entire project, right? World model access is simply not enough. You cannot just hand an AI the keys to a medical simulator without it crashing the patient.
No, you absolutely cannot. The agent must be rigorously, specifically trained on how to use that environment.
You have to, cure the AI of its greed. The researchers realized they couldn't just let the AI loose. They had to build a highly structured curriculum.
Right, they needed to send it to medical school.
And the result of that medical school curriculum is a specialized agent they call SepsisAgent.
SepsisAgent, yes. And it's built on a highly efficient backbone model called Qwen34B Instruct. The researchers deliberately chose a lightweight architecture because, in a real ICU, an AI needs to be agile.
It can't take 10 minutes to think about every move.
Exactly. SepsisAgent can process the data and make a decision step in about 6 seconds.
Wow.
But the true innovation is the 3-stage training pipeline it goes through.
So what does this all mean? How do you train the greed out of an AI? Stage 1 of the curriculum is focused entirely on forcing the model to care about tomorrow. They use supervised fine-tuning to ground the AI in long-term risks.
Right. Instead of letting the AI suggest treatments right away, the researchers force it to predict the future state of the patient first.
Oh, that's clever.
They use historical data to teach it to predict 2 specific things. First, in-hospital mortality, meaning what are the odds this patient survives their entire stay? And second, the patient's vasopressor requirement for the next 24 hours. The AI has to look at the current context and internalize these long-term outcomes before it is ever allowed to formulate a one-step treatment plan.
It makes perfect sense. It's like learning to drive. Stage 1 is reading the manual to understand the dangers. Before you are allowed to touch the steering wheel, you have to prove you can identify the hazards miles down the road.
Exactly.
Then they move to stage 2, which focuses on a concept called behavior cloning. Now that the AI understands the long-term risks, it needs to learn the workflow of a cautious expert clinician.
Right. The workflow they want to instill is propose, simulate, refine.
Propose, simulate, refine.
Yeah. And to do this, the researchers used an advanced model to synthesize the reasoning traces of top-tier human doctors. They mapped out the exact cognitive process and expert uses.
Okay.
The trace shows the doctor analyzing the data, proposing an initial treatment, simulating the potential outcome in their head, realizing the risk, and refining their choice down to a safer option.
Wow.
And SepsisAgent is trained to clone this exact behavioral loop.
So stage 2 is writing shotgun. The AI is writing with a master physician, watching them check their metaphorical mirrors, anticipate the shifting conditions of the patient, and adjust their strategy. The AI is learning the habit of deliberately querying the simulator before committing to an action.
Apprenticeship is a great way to view it, but mimicking an expert is ultimately limiting.
Why is that?
Well, you only learn what you have observed, and human doctors, while excellent, still make suboptimal decisions in highly complex edge cases.
Fair point.
That is why stage 3 is where the real paradigm shift happens. The final phase of training relies on a sophisticated form of reinforcement learning.
Okay, this is where they take the training wheels off. The AI is driving in a virtual Grand Theft Auto-style simulator where you get to practice and anticipate danger on your own.
That's a fun way to put it, but yes,
Yeah.
it practices across the entire patient timeline, using a method called Group Relative Policy Optimization, or GRPO.
Yeah.
SepsisAgent uses the simulator as a closed environment to roll out full, multi-day patient trajectories, from the moment of admission to the moment of discharge.
Oh, wow.
It proposes, it simulates, it acts, and then it experiences the consequences of that action hours later.
But how do they score the AI during this practice phase? Because we know from earlier that if you give it the wrong reward, it will just get greedy again.
That's a great question. They constructed a highly balanced composite reward system. The AI receives a massive reward if the simulated patient survives.
Obviously.
It receives smaller rewards for stabilizing specific organ dysfunctions along the way. But crucially, it receives strict, heavy penalties if it violates established sepsis medical guidelines.
Okay, so it can't cheat the system.
Exactly. It is forced to learn the rhythm of treating the disease over time, optimizing for long-horizon strategies rather than isolated snapshots of success.
It's practicing millions of iterations, making mistakes, crashing the simulated patient, and adjusting its strategy, all without ever touching a real human being. That rigorous curriculum sounds incredible in theory,
It really is.
but the real question is, does this architecture actually work when tested against unseen data? What happens during the final exam?
To find out, the researchers subjected SepsisAgent to a final test. They used a held-out test set of 725 patient episodes from the MI-ISEPL base.
Okay.
These were complex sepsis cases that the AI had never encountered during its training.
And since we obviously cannot test experimental AI algorithms on living patients in a real ICU,
No, definitely not.
the researchers used advanced statistical methods to evaluate the performance. These estimators allow researchers to look at the historical data, see what the human doctor actually did, and mathematically estimate what would have happened if the AI's policy had been followed instead.
And the results were dominant. SepsisAgent achieved the strongest off-policy value across the board. It outperformed the actual human clinicians from the historical data. It outperformed older traditional reinforcement learning models, like AI Clinician, and it vastly outperformed all of those generic, unaugmented language models we discussed earlier.
Okay, I have to push back here, though. Beating baselines on a statistical spreadsheet is one thing, but older reinforcement learning models have achieved high scores in medical simulations before, often by finding dangerous loopholes in the math.
Yes, they have.
So does this high score actually mean it's safer for that hypothetical crashing patient we talked about earlier?
That is a vital distinction, and it is why the safety profile of SepsisAgent is arguably the most important finding in the paper. Traditional RL models do struggle with safety. They often recommend extreme overdosing of medications just to chase a high mathematical reward.
Right.
But SepsisAgent achieved a phenomenal 97.95% sepsis guideline adherence rate.
Wait, nearly 98% adherence to the medical guardrails?
Yes. Furthermore, it demonstrated the absolute lowest rate of unsafe actions, which the researchers defined as extreme underdosing or overdosing of fluids and vasopressors.
That's incredible.
Even the human clinicians in the historical data occasionally exhibited suboptimal underdosing patterns. But SepsisAgent managed to stay strictly within the safe clinical boundaries while simultaneously maximizing the long-term survival outcomes.
So it proved that it wasn't just gaming the simulator, it was actually practicing safe medicine.
Exactly. It doesn't take dangerous shortcuts like the traditional RL models did.
But the paper reveals something even more profound about how it achieved that safety. And this leads to the twist in the ablation study.
Yes, the ablation study.
The researchers wanted to know exactly which part of the curriculum made the biggest difference. So they systematically stripped away different parts of the training pipeline to see how the AI's performance degraded.
And they confirmed that stage 3, the RL phase inside the simulator, drove the most significant policy value improvements. But in doing so, they uncovered a secondary effect, something they referred to as internalization.
This is the real aha moment of the deep dive for me. The researchers wanted to know, did SepsisAgent just memorize the reward signals of the simulator, or did it actually learn something fundamental about human biology?
Right. And to figure this out, they did something drastic. They took the simulator away entirely.
They took away the crystal ball.
Yes, they removed the AI's ability to peek into the future. They asked SepsisAgent to simply look at a patient's current state and predict the in-hospital mortality and the future vasopressor needs, relying solely on its internal neural network.
And the result.
SepsisAgent actually performed better at predicting the patient's future without the simulator than the earlier versions of the model did.
Wait, really?
Yeah, by spending thousands of hours practicing inside the world model, the AI actually altered its own internal weights. It internalized the patient dynamics.
So it didn't just memorize the reward signal, it actually learned the underlying physics of human biology.
Exactly. It didn't just learn a list of actions to take. It developed a profound, intrinsic understanding of how a patient's body evolves during septic shock. The process of proposing, simulating, and refining didn't just teach the AI a policy. It fundamentally enhanced the AI's ability to comprehend the disease itself.
Okay, let's pull all of this together for the listener. We started with a fundamental problem. Large language models are brilliant at reading medical textbooks, but they have zero clinical experience. They understand the definition of a drug, but they are entirely blind to how that drug physically impacts a specific patient over the next 12 hours.
Right, they possess semantic knowledge, but lack the dynamics layer.
Right. And to fix this, researchers built a clinical world model, a sandbox fueled by tens of thousands of real ICU records where the AI could safely test its treatments.
But they quickly discovered that simply handing a generic AI a simulator is dangerous. The AI acts like a greedy algorithm, prioritizing short-term fixes that ultimately crash the patient's biology later.
Which necessitated the creation of SepsisAgent and its rigorous curriculum.
Exactly.
They forced the AI to focus on 24-hour survival outcomes. They taught it to clone the cautious, propose, simulate, refine workflow of top human doctors. And finally, they let it practice relentlessly inside the simulator until it not only mastered the long-term treatment of sepsis, but actually internalized the rhythm of human physiology.
And the outcome is an AI agent that significantly outperforms existing models and human baselines in simulated evaluations, while maintaining an incredibly strict adherence to medical safety guidelines.
If you are listening to this, whether you work in tech, healthcare, or you're just incredibly curious about where the world is heading, this matters to you.
It really does.
This research represents a massive paradigm shift in how artificial intelligence is being developed. We are rapidly moving away from treating AI like a static answer engine, a really smart search bar that just summarizes text.
Right.
We are moving toward dynamic, experimenting agents that can safely tackle high-stakes, sequential, real-world problems. We aren't just teaching AI to think anymore. We are finally teaching it to anticipate the physical consequences of its choices.
And if we zoom out and look at the broader implications, this research leaves us with a truly provocative thought to ponder.
What's that?
Well, if an AI system can internalize the incredibly chaotic, complex, and highly variable dynamics of the human body simply by practicing inside a simulated world model, what happens when we apply this exact propose, simulate, refine architecture to other chaotic systems?
Oh, wow. That is a staggering implication.
Imagine an AI agent practicing in a high-fidelity world model of a major city's power grid during a Category 5 hurricane.
Right.
It proposes rerouting power, simulates the potential cascade failures, and refines its strategy before throwing a single real-world switch.
Or imagine an AI managing a global supply chain during a port strike or a pandemic, constantly simulating the ripple effects of its logistics choices.
Exactly. We're no longer just teaching AI to analyze data.
Right.
We're teaching it to experience consequence, adapt, and build an internal intuition for how the physical world operates.
And maybe, just maybe, when it is finally time to fly that damaged plane through the storm, the AI will already know exactly which levers to pull to get us safely through the clouds. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.